Silence creates value, and most people don't understand that until they've already given too much away. When a man can go days without talking to you, the first instinct is panic. You start wondering what you did wrong. You check your phone constantly. You replay the last conversation in your head, and then you feel the urge to fix it, to send a text, to casually check in, to create a reason to talk. But that instinct to reach out is usually driven by fear, not power. The moment you start over-communicating, you lower your value in his mind, not because you're not worthy, but because you remove the mystery. You remove the challenge. You remove the space that allows him to feel your absence. When you're always available, always responding instantly, always initiating conversation, you unintentionally teach him that access to you requires no effort. And anything that requires no effort is rarely respected at a high level. Men pay attention to what shifts. They notice change. If you've been the one sending good morning texts, double texting, sending memes, starting conversations, and suddenly you stop, that silence speaks louder than any emotional paragraph ever could. Silence forces reflection. It creates curiosity. It interrupts patterns. And when you interrupt a pattern, you interrupt comfort. Comfort is where effort dies. When he feels secure that no matter how long he disappears, you'll still be there smiling. When he returns, he has no reason to adjust his behavior. Human nature responds to consequences, not drama, not lectures, not emotional speeches, consequences. And silence is a consequence that feels natural, not forced. When you stop filling the space, he starts to feel it. At first, he may not notice. He might be distracted, busy, entertained. But eventually, there will be a moment, a quiet moment, maybe late at night, maybe when he sees something that reminds him of you, and he'll check his phone. No message, no missed call, no reaction to his social media. That's when your value begins to rise in his mind. Scarcity increases value, always. If something is constantly available, the brain categorizes it as background noise. But when something that used to be consistent suddenly becomes limited, the brain becomes alert. Now it wants to know why. Now it wants to regain access. Now it wants reassurance. Silence also protects your dignity. When you react emotionally to inconsistency, you give him proof that he controls your emotional state. If he can disappear and cause anxiety, then reappear and cause relief, that's power. And when someone has emotional power over you without commitment, the balance is off. But when you stay calm, when you stay busy, when you don't chase clarity from someone who isn't offering consistency, you maintain control of yourself. And self-control is attractive. Emotional stability is attractive. Confidence without needing validation is magnetic. Silence is not about playing games. It's about self-respect. There's a difference. Games are manipulative. Silence rooted in self-respect says, I will not overextend myself for someone who is unsure about me. It says, my energy is valuable and I don't distribute it where it's not reciprocated. You have to understand something deeper. When you over-communicate, you reduce the opportunity for him to invest Investment creates attachment. The more effort someone puts in, the more they value what they're investing in. If you are doing all the emotional labor, all the initiating, all the maintaining, he has nothing invested. And when people have nothing invested, walking away costs them nothing. Silence gives him room to step up. If he doesn't step up, that silence gave you clarity. Either way, you win, because you're no longer exhausting yourself trying to maintain something one-sided. Another powerful element of silence is that it forces you to redirect your focus. Instead of monitoring his behavior, you begin monitoring your own growth. You start asking better questions. Why am I anxious? Why am I tolerating inconsistency? Why am I afraid of space? That self-awareness builds confidence, and confidence changes how you show up. When you're not glued to your phone waiting for him, your posture changes, your tone changes, your energy changes. You're not responding from need, you're responding from choice. And there is nothing more powerful than a woman who chooses rather than waits. Silence also exposes intentions. If he truly values you, he will notice your absence and close the gap. He will reach out. He will check in. He will adjust. A man who cares does not let distance grow unchecked. But if he doesn't notice, if he doesn't care, then your silence saved you months or years of confusion. You must be careful not to confuse attention with intention. Some men will reach out only when they're bored, only when their other options fall through, only when it's convenient. Silence helps you observe patterns. Does he reach out consistently or only when it benefits him? Does he initiate meaningful conversation or just surface-level check-ins? When you're always talking, you don't get to observe. You're too busy performing. Silence puts you in observer mode, and the observer always has more information than the performer. There's also strength in emotional discipline. It takes maturity to feel the urge to text and choose not to. It takes strength to sit with uncertainty without trying to control it. But every time you resist the impulse to chase, you build internal power. That power shows in how you communicate later. When he does reach out, and he likely will if he feels the shift, you don't respond with anger. You don't respond with desperation. You respond calmly, warm but measured, interested but not overeager. You show him access to you is available but not unlimited. Silence teaches people how to treat you. If your silence leads to effort from him, that's a good sign. If your silence leads to permanent distance, that's an even clearer sign. Either way, you protect your emotional investment. When you remove the constant reassurance, when you stop over giving attention, when you create space instead of filling it, you allow him to feel what life is like without your constant presence. And if your presence was meaningful, he will not stay comfortable in that absence for long. And if he does stay comfortable, then your silence just revealed that you were more invested than he was. That truth might sting, but it is far better than living in illusion. When you shift your focus to yourself, everything changes, not just in the relationship, but inside you. Most women don't realize how much of their emotional energy gets tied up in anticipation, waiting for the text, waiting for the call, waiting for reassurance, waiting for clarity. And while you're waiting, life is passing. Your goals are paused. Your mood depends on notifications. Your confidence rises and falls based on someone else's consistency. The moment a man can go days without talking to you, that's your signal, not to chase, not to question your worth, but to redirect your attention, because attention is currency, and wherever you spend it, that's what grows. If you spend it on anxiety, anxiety grows. If you spend it on doubt, doubt grows. If you spend it on him, while he's not investing equally, you are watering a plant that isn't watering you back. Shifting focus to yourself is not about revenge. It's not about trying to teach him a lesson. It's about remembering that you had a life before him. You had routines, ambitions, interests, and dreams that didn't revolve around whether someone texted you back. Think about this. When you're constantly checking your phone, your energy feels tight, restricted, reactive. But when you're busy building something meaningful, whether that's your fitness, your career, your creativity, your friendships, your energy expands. You're no longer reacting to his behavior. You're leading your own life. There is something magnetic about a woman who is fulfilled outside of a relationship. A woman who has plans, who has structure, who has standards, who has momentum. When a man senses that your happiness does not depend on him, he starts to see you differently. You're no longer an option waiting to be chosen. You are a lifestyle that requires qualification. But here's the deeper part. Shifting focus protects your emotional health. When you obsess over someone's silence, your mind fills in the gaps with worst-case scenarios. Maybe he's losing interest. Maybe there's someone else. Maybe I said something wrong. These thoughts drain you. They chip away at your confidence. When you replace that mental space with action, real, tangible progress, your brain has less room for insecurity. You feel productive, accomplished, grounded, and that grounded energy shows in how you communicate. Instead of texting from a place of fear, you speak from a place of balance. Instead of needing reassurance, you observe behavior. Instead of trying to secure him, you evaluate him. You must understand that attraction thrives on space, not distance that feels cold or punishing, but space that allows both people to breathe. When you make him the center of your focus, you unintentionally put pressure on the connection. Pressure kills excitement. It turns something natural into something heavy. But when you're building your life, laughing with your friends, pursuing your passions, improving your body, growing your mind, he becomes an addition, not the foundation. And men feel that difference immediately. When he calls and you're genuinely busy, not pretending, but actually engaged in your own world, your tone is lighter. You're not clinging to the conversation. You're not stretching it out because it's the highlight of your day. You're speaking because you want to, not because you need to. There's also a psychological truth here. People value what appears valuable to others. When you value yourself enough to invest in your growth, you signal high self-worth. and self-worth sets the standard for how others treat you. If you drop everything every time he appears, you communicate that he outranks your priorities. But when you maintain your schedule, your boundaries, your commitments, you communicate that access to you fits into your life. It does not control it. Another important piece is identity. When you focus too heavily on someone who is inconsistent, your identity starts shrinking around that connection. You become the woman waiting. That identity feels small. It feels powerless. But when you focus on your goals, your health, your finances, your creativity, your spirituality, your identity expands. You're not just someone's romantic interest. You're a woman with direction, with standards, with movement. When you are deeply invested in yourself, you also become less tolerant of inconsistency, not because you're angry, but because you're busy. You simply don't have the emotional bandwidth to entertain someone who treats you casually. When a man senses that your world is full, that your time is limited, that your energy is directed toward meaningful things, he instinctively understands that being part of your life requires intention. He cannot drift in and out without consequence because your life is moving forward regardless of his participation. Shifting focus also removes the illusion of scarcity. Many women hold on tightly because they fear losing the opportunity. But when you're actively improving yourself, your options expand, your social circle expands, your confidence expands, and with expansion comes choice. Do not reward inconsistent behavior. That sounds simple, but emotionally, it is one of the hardest things to practice. Because when he finally reaches out after days of silence, your first instinct is relief. You feel seen again, chosen again, reconnected again. And in that moment of relief, you're tempted to respond with excitement, warmth, long messages, fast replies, as if nothing happened. If he disappears for 3 days and comes back to affection, attention, and instant access, you have just trained him. You've taught him that inconsistency has no cost. You've shown him that your availability is unconditional. And when something is unconditional without commitment, it becomes taken for granted. Men, like all people, respond to patterns. If the pattern is, I can come and go and she'll still be there, that pattern becomes comfortable. And comfort without accountability leads to minimal effort. Not rewarding inconsistency does not mean arguing. It does not mean sending emotional paragraphs about how hurt you were. It does not mean playing games or trying to make him jealous. It means adjusting your energy calmly, quietly, powerfully. When he texts after disappearing, you don't ignore him out of spite. You respond when you're available. You keep your tone polite but measured. You don't over-engage. You don't overextend. You don't give him the emotional intensity he didn't earn. If you keep rewarding small effort with big enthusiasm, you lower the standard, and once a standard drops, it is very difficult to raise it again. Early patterns often become permanent habits. You have to detach from the fear of losing him. That fear is what makes you overgive. It whispers, if I don't respond fast, he'll lose interest. If I don't show excitement, he'll think I don't care. But a man who loses interest because you didn't overcompensate was never deeply invested to begin with. High-value connections are not fragile. They are strengthened by mutual effort, not maintained by one-sided reassurance. When you stop rewarding inconsistency, something interesting happens. He begins to feel the shift. He notices you're not as instantly available. He notices you're not carrying the conversation. He notices the energy is different, and that difference forces him to decide step up or step back. Another important aspect is emotional self-control. When someone disappears and reappears, they often expect things to resume exactly where they left off. If you immediately give them that comfort, you remove any awareness of the gap. But when your response is calm and slightly reserved, it subtly communicates, access to me is influenced by how you show up. There's also a psychological truth about reward systems. The brain associates behavior with outcome. If he disappears and the outcome is still affection and attention, the brain labels disappearing as safe. If he disappears and the outcome is reduced access and slightly cooler energy, the brain registers a shift, not punishment, just consequence. You must resist the urge to prove you're unbothered. Real power is quiet. You don't need to post indirect messages. You don't need to act dramatically distant. You simply match effort with effort. If he sends a short message, you send a short response. If he takes hours to reply, you don't rearrange your day to respond in seconds. You mirror the investment level. Imbalance is what creates emotional exhaustion. When you give 100% and he gives 40%, you feel drained. When you give 40% to someone giving 40%, you feel stable. And when he increases to 70%, you can increase accordingly. When you stop rewarding inconsistency, you also strengthen your boundaries. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are internal standards. They say, this is the level of treatment I respond to. Without boundaries, you become reactive. With boundaries, you become selective. It communicates self-respect. It shows that your time and attention are not handed out carelessly. And people tend to value what they have to qualify for. If he questions your shift, you stay calm. You don't accuse. You don't justify. You simply continue matching energy. If he wants deeper connection, he will increase effort. If he doesn't, he will maintain distance. Either way, you are no longer over-investing. By not rewarding inconsistent behavior, you protect your emotional health. You stop riding the roller coaster of highs and lows. You stop feeling euphoric when he texts and anxious when he doesn't. You create stability within yourself. Stability is powerful because it makes you less predictable in a healthy way. Not emotionally unpredictable, but predictably self-respecting. He learns that access to your warmth is connected to his consistency. Many women fear that pulling back will push him away. But if slight distance pushes him away, he was already halfway out the door. A man who truly values you will lean in when he senses he's losing ground. The key is patience. Don't expect immediate transformation. Behavior patterns take time to adjust. But the moment you stop rewarding the wrong behavior, You begin shaping the dynamic differently. When you stop rewarding inconsistency, you stop negotiating with potential. You stop hoping small effort will turn into big commitment. You respond to what is, not what could be. Let his actions reveal his interest, not his words, not his potential, not the version of him you imagine he could become, his actions. Because actions require effort, and effort reveals priority. When a man is genuinely interested, you will not have to decode silence. You will not have to analyze mixed signals. You will not have to wonder where you stand every other day. Interest shows up consistently. It may not always be perfect, but it is present. It is intentional. It makes itself known. If he can go days without talking to you, that is already information. The mistake most people make is trying to reinterpret that information in a way that feels safer. He's just busy. He's stressed. He's not good at texting. But when someone values connection, they create space for it. Even busy people text the people they care about. Even stressed people check in when someone matters. If he reaches out consistently, initiates plans, follows through, and communicates clearly, that's interest. If he disappears, resurfaces randomly, cancels often, or leaves you guessing, that's low investment. And low investment is not something you argue your way out of. It is something you observe and respond to. Observation is